So let's talk about something that nobody mentions during doctoral orientations, or even new faculty orientation for that matter.
Just one thing? Do we have enough time? Literally, that's like the longest list ever.
It is. Right?
It is. Totally.
So I'm talking about the money thing, though.
Okay, I'm listening.
And the fact that most of you listening would not earn enough from your academic position, at least early on, maybe ever. We were just talking about retirement. That's difficult.
And to be clear, that's not failure. That's the state of higher ed.
Yeah, it is the new normal. So we want to acknowledge it, that the fact that we ask graduate students, we asked ourselves to spend quite a bit of time, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, getting a PhD with the idea that there's a job at the end of that.
Yeah, and maybe a couple of, if you don't find a tenure track job, a couple of years in postdocs or doing adjuncting at multiple campuses. And then we're supposed to feel very grateful when we're offered a $60,000 assistant professor position in a city where rent alone is $2,000.
And at the same time, often, we're carrying some student debt load, sometimes even still carrying our undergraduate student debt load. And we're supposed to be thankful. Yep. And I remember negotiating my first salary, and I was so grateful because the department chair offered an extra $500 and told me also, you're not going to get anyone.
I mean, I appreciate when they're honest.
Yes, I did appreciate that, actually.
Right? I appreciate when they're honest. So, today we're going to talk about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It gives you a little bit of the ick sometimes. And yeah, so we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, and really, we're here to argue that people don't want you to think about this. As we said, often nobody talks about this, but side hustles are not necessarily evil. They're actually incredibly useful. When you think about it, they're strategic because you can think about multiple pathways. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, what happens if academic life isn't for you? What is out there? And we'll talk about the career choice, but right now, even if you start on an academic path and you're a postdoc, you're doing an extra year as an adjunct, whatever it is, you need some options. And we are aware it's going to trigger some people, so, be ready.
Yeah, no, I mean, it already has. I am living this episode literally right now.
Yes, you are.
I am deep in this episode. Have gotten emails, conversations in hallways around how, oh, well, you have a side hustle? Why do you have a side hustle? You don't really need a side hustle. Why do you, what? What about rigor?
With an extra at the end. Which is precisely the problem. The mythology that real academics or scholars don't concern themselves with the money and with making it through the month and being able to pay rent or whatever else you need to eat a little bit. I don't know.
Retirement?
Yeah, retirement. So this is really a conversation about how you can do this without really risking your integrity. Staying on the main thing, right? You have an academic career or you're planning an academic career and that's the center of what you're doing. You can still do more and you can still do this with integrity.
Right, because ultimately at the end of the day, right, the mythology that real scholars, they do it for the life of the mind. Look, your mind's not going to be very functional if it's not eating. Your mind's not going to be very functional if you don't know how you're going to make rent or your mortgage or retire, right? And so really what we're saying is this is a valid way forward, 1. And 2, we're not saying to abandon your research, but to be very clear about what your ethical standards are and how to engage in work that doesn't necessarily turn you into a corporate consultant who happens to have a PhD. But if that's what you choose to do, we support you. We are in your corner.
And we're talking about doing this with transparency and with integrity. We are not saying you should hide this. We're not saying you should lie or have a breach of contract or anything like that. What we're saying is there are ways to do it. And I thought about the conversations we've had about how you manage your time and when is it the time that belongs to the university and when it's my time. And if I'm using my time, then I can do things for me, whether they're a hobby or family or sleep, God forbid, or a side hustle. No, I'm sleeping fine. Thank you.
Okay, great, because sleep deprivation and dementia are linked.
Correlated, yes.
It's not causation, but it's correlation, and that makes me worried.
Something like that is happening right now.
What is going on with your coffee?
I am spilling it. It's all fine.
Oh my gosh. So really, we're going to talk through the how of things that you've never perhaps learned or haven't been talked about around how to potentially diversify your income. And when we're talking about diversifying income, it's not going to be income overnight, but ways that you can engage in contemporary economies without having to compromise your integrity.
And I'm Guy Trainin, a professor here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
And I'm Nick, blah, blah, blah. That's literally what the script says. I'm an associate professor, K6 of elementary literacy education here at UNL. And this is not that kind of doctor.
Yes, and obviously I'm not this kind of doctor either.
God. Okay, dance break. Woo!
All right, let's get into it. So, what are your side hustles? What have you tried?
What have I tried?
Yes.
So I do have a personal YouTube channel, which is not monetized yet.
Yeah.
Again, going back to in our introduction, incomes from social media, if you choose to go that direction, take time. You have to build up followings, you have to build up reputations, and sometimes that takes a long time, particularly in academic spaces. Very rarely does certain kinds of things go viral quickly, and even when they do go viral, it's not always a good thing.
Yes.
Right? So lots of content production on my end, and actually, as I'm saying, I'm living this discussion right now. Like, I'm shifting part of that content creation into actual instructional content right now. So that's part of it. Other side hustles I've engaged in, I've done some consulting. I've worked with governmental agencies around school turnaround. I've worked with states around science of reading. I've worked with school districts. I've contracted with school districts around professional development for like longitudinal contracts. So like spending 3 years in schools with teachers. Yeah, phenomenal work. Love all of that work. And it has been super duper rewarding. But as we hinted to, it is this like weird, well, why do you do that?
And for me, I did some consulting with school districts, although less so. I did a lot of evaluation work, especially early in my career, with specific school districts, with different outfits for different opportunities for federal grants. So it was a way that actually brought me into some grants eventually. But I started out on the side of being an external evaluator on a grant, for example, paid really well. And I spent a good portion of my summer doing elements of that. But at the same time, it was really capitalizing on what I'm good at, right? And that is where you want to start. Because yes, you can deliver pizzas. I know you can.
You can drive Uber.
You can drive Uber. But there are much more lucrative things that can really merge with your career and create long-term options instead of a short-term solution. But for that, you do need development time.
Yeah, you do need development time. And part of that is around, again, boundaries, right? And understanding what the ROI is on anything, right? When is, if you are looking for an instant monetary solution, then you need to take that into account. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But if you're looking for growth in, like, say, social media or evaluation or consulting or whatever, like, some of these take time to build up reputation. Some of these take time for word of mouth to get out. And you always want to make sure that you're thinking about how much your time and your knowledge is worth, right? So when I've also tutored individual students, reading is my space. That's where I've taught classrooms of kids to read at scale. So teaching one child who may have some barriers is pretty darn delightful, right? And so I've done that as well. And depending on who I'm working with, what family I'm working with, there's a sliding scale there. But there is an ick factor to thinking about how much to charge directly, right? I'm currently pulling together an online digital badge around phonics foundations for folks to take, and trying to figure out what the price point of that is feels a little weird. And it's not, I've taken a handful of business courses in undergraduate, but that's not what that's not what our training necessarily prepares us for, right?
The thing that always sticks in my mind, especially when you think about how much to charge, first of all, your time is valuable. That is something that, going back to your point, we have limited amount of time, and if you're doing a side hustle, that's beyond your 40 hours or so a week that you're working for the university. So that's on top. That's going to be hard. So you need to value it high enough so you're not, if you're finding yourself working an extra 20 hours or more, you really have to start thinking about, maybe I should do less of that, but charge more, and find out who exactly is choosing not to engage. Now, that's hard when we're talking about the individuals. It's much easier when we're talking about companies or big grants.
Right.
So if it's a $2-3 million grant and you're saying, well, I expect to be paid a certain proportion out of this, and I actually have a percentage. For example, I used to work with people. This is if your grant is this big, it's likely to be in this range, because obviously when you have more money, you're doing more things, there's more to evaluate, therefore this is a rough way to think about it, and then we can think about the exact components. But you have to think about your time as very valuable. There was an exercise I learned very early in my career when I was doing a lot of tutoring. I went to a business conference that somebody said, close your eyes and imagine that you are tripling your prices. Overnight, you're tripling your prices. You're charging $50 an hour, now you're charging $150. If you have a third of your customers staying with you, you won. You have to work less and you're making more, essentially. And so I'm not asking you to triple, but what I'm asking is talk to other people who are doing these things and ask them how much they're charging. Most people will tell you. Some people won't. They'll get a little cagey about it.
There's also Google.
Yes, you can definitely Google, and definitely send me an email, and I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll give you an example. And there is a sliding scale. So if I'm working with a not-for-profit that I know is struggling to exist, I will give them a break. And if they're local, I will give them a break. Versus if they're from another state and they have a big grant or they have a lot of money, I do not feel like I need to give them a break. They need to give me a break. And if it requires travel, right? You talked about working with schools. Those are full days. There's no, I'm coming to do a workshop for an hour and a half. It's a full day.
Those were like 4-day blocks. They used to put me in a hotel, the Holiday Inn Express, and it was delightful. Like
with breakfast?
Oh, of course.
Okay. That's the most important thing, is that you can wake up and get the breakfast.
I'm a classy guy, man. I don't stop at a hotel unless there's a free breakfast, unless I can scoop those eggs out of the warmer. I don't want it. But I think it's also helpful to categorize if you're planning this out, what's going to be active income, where like you're literally exchanging your time in that moment for a particular amount of money. And then there's passive income, where you are front-loading the work and then you are putting it out in the world, and whether it's a course or it's videos or what have you, it will continue to accrue views. And if you're on YouTube, the AdSense, once you hit particular markers, like that's passive income.
Yeah.
And thinking about what you're willing to do in those two areas, I think is really, really helpful.
Okay, so you're thinking about the badge and you have a lot of content you've created yourself. How do you think about the boundaries between your university job and what you're doing outside?
So when you're a faculty member, and it's really important to check your Regents documentation. So here at UNL, anything that I create within my coursework, anything that you create within your coursework that does not require or has not been funded by the institution is yours. And you can do what you want with that, right? Now, mileage on that may vary. Check your local institution. Be aware of policies.
Yes. Be very careful about that.
Be very, very careful, because the other thing that, yes, that information is yours. So when I'm thinking about this badge, I'm utilizing materials that, I have revised and rethought over the course of 5 years, and am going to package them in such a way that they make sense as an online course, as an online badge. And because I'm going to do that on my own, I can't use UNL badge. I can't use UNL logos. I can't use any of that kind of marketing branding stuff. And there's a lot of story there. I think the Substack will come out before this video does. So if you know, read.
And if you don't know, go
read that Substack.
Yeah.
Because you can do these things, but there are parameters, right, that you have to be aware of. And the thing that I find interesting sometimes is how those parameters can sometimes get used as kind of like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure that you want to go it on your own? Yes, I am. I am totally sure that I want to go it on my own.
I don't want to sell the Substack because I haven't read it yet. I'm still excited to read it, but one of the things that is true when you're creating things on your own is you can move a lot faster than an institution. I've got proposals that are crawling their way through the vines of academic approval. And if I created it on my own and just published it somewhere, it would be out. So that's a challenge. The second thing is, if you're working as a consultant or something like this, you got to make sure that you're working, again, within the parameters of the institution. For example, at UNL, there is official paperwork that helps you define, this is how I'm doing this is the times, this is how it's not encroaching on my job, and people have to approve it. I've never had a problem approving it, but this also protects you. So nobody can come to you later and say, wait a minute, you're supposed to be working here, but you were doing this other stuff over there. If you've got the paperwork and you abide by it, then everything is fine. And remember, we, for example, can use summers because we are mostly on 9-month contracts. If you're a graduate student, most likely you're on a 9-month contract. So that extra time is yours to use however you want. And that's an important way where you can actually get some of those hours back, or really say, this is the time for me to create so it doesn't eat my day.
Right. And if you're thinking through like content creation, rely on your metadata. Because if it does come into question, like you will then be able to say, oh, look at this file. I made it on a Saturday, right? And there's something to that. Or I made it at like 10 o'clock at night or 6 in the morning or whatever. But in case that comes into question, you're kind of protected. right?
And another thing which is true, right now I'm on my university computer because we're doing this as part of the university. We're not monetizing it in any way. But I also have an extra computer that I use for everything that I'm doing outside of university. So there wouldn't be a question of I'm using university property and I'm taking advantage in any way. So make sure you have these boundaries that are clear, and they're clear to also to anybody that you're working with.
Yeah. And I think once you separate those things,
it becomes easier.
It becomes much easier, but it is this like disentanglement, right? And I think when we go into particularly education, right? Particularly at a higher education institution, right? With this notion of like, oh, I'm going to teach all the things and everyone's going to learn and it should be free. It doesn't have to necessarily be free, right? Like people are paying the institution money in order to take your courses, and that's part of what your job is. However, it's totally within your realm to externalize some of that within the boundaries laid out by your institution. And I would highly recommend exploring what those options are and just being aware of what the guidelines are.
All right, so how do you start? How do you build really, what are you going to do? How are you thinking about this?
I mean, personally, and just even here, it's a lot of trial and error, right? Like it's a lot of trying to think through what works, what resonates, what makes you happy, because or not even happy, but like what do you find worthwhile? What do you find to be a good use of your time? And so if you're thinking about consulting, what kind of consulting do you want to do? Like what's the particular brand of consulting that you want to engage in? What are the kinds of social media content that you want to create? What are the things that you want to be doing, and then playing with that. It's very few people have something hit the first time, regardless of what venue it is, right? So you have to, one, take time to build relationships.
Yeah.
If it's on social media, you're building relationships with your viewers or your readers or whoever it is. If it's consulting, building up those networks, right? Like as I was leaving Missouri, I had 4 other school districts who were like, hey, we would love to host you for 3 years. How do we get this to work?
Yeah.
And I was like, moving to Wisconsin. Dumb, but
I would argue this is a really important thing that you just mentioned, because I've worked with districts as well, and I try the same thing, and that is the one inviting you for one workshop will work in the short term, but eventually you want to have long-term relationships. You do not want to go into 20 districts and work with them once and never see them again. I'm willing to do that for a while just to see if there's a relationship building. But after a while, it's not worth your time. The travel, even if they pay for the travel and everything around it and the time, it takes a lot out of you, and it's hard to do during an academic year. Right? You can't travel out of town for 3 weeks to give workshops in 3 different places. So saying to districts, let's create these long-term relationships, even in tutoring. It is about building a long-term relationship that you don't have to constantly chase the next contract. And you can also give a lot more. That goes back to the integrity. I know that I can do anything for 2 hours, but is it really going to make change? No. If they pay enough, I feel less icky, maybe,
for
a while.
And I think the larger question is it worth the extra time that you're investing in it?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about a side hustle, is you're giving up your free time. So is it worth it? That's a big question. Huge question to answer. But I think the other thing that it forces you to do is it forces you to think about your work differently. It forces you to think about, budget cuts are happening all over. We see institutions of higher education eliminating positions, and oftentimes, this institution right here. And there's this notion of like, what do I do? And we're trained as academics to think in terms of like, oh, here's the projects that we did, here's the papers that we've written, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're thinking about moving into a different area, you're forced to think about your skill set. And you're forced to think about what you can actually do that's durable and transportable into other scenarios. And that's really powerful, both from like an autonomy perspective, like, oh, hey,
I can do this.
I can do this, right? Like, I recently had a job interview with someone who's not higher ed. And the ability to actually sit in that interview and talk through cogently what I could do. Didn't get the job, by the way, but
I appreciate that.
It was worth a go.
Yeah.
What that helped me think through is, holy cow, this is what I can do.
Yeah.
Outside of this.
And here's the thing. I'm borrowing from sports, but I always think about it. We are professionals working for professional teams. And what it turns out is tenure gives you a little bit of protection, but as we're saying, not as much as you thought. And that still depends on you actually getting to the point where you have tenure.
Right.
And a lot of things can happen on the way. They might cut your department. They might decide you don't get tenure. You might decide it's not for you. There are lots of things that happen that way. And basically what it goes down to is universities are less and less loyal to their professors. And we have to think about ourselves and the development of our own portfolio as just keeping our options open and not committing to this institution, because I'm looking at colleagues who are now looking at, we have to go somewhere else. And we thought we were here and we were stable and the institution was supporting us, and suddenly you find out no. So the solution is diversify, find out what you can do, define your skill set, not just as an outcome for the institution, but actually for yourself.
Right.
Because you have value.
You have value. And that's I think that's the biggest takeaway is that like this ivory tower shenanigans has always been a fiction. And the starving scholar is really just exploitation dressed up as virtue. But your expertise, it has value. And because it has value, people are willing to pay for that.
And remember, the institution actually doesn't want you to think about this. They want you to think that everything goes through the institution because they are boring. They are really using us as the way to make money. They don't exist if we are not here doing the labor. And they are often taking advantage in multiple ways. We're not saying they're evil.
Nope.
But what we are saying is we exist outside the institution, and therefore we should have the opportunity.
And it's okay. In fact, we're encouraging it. We want you to leverage your expertise for your own sustainability. And I want to be clear that that's not mercenary. That's just basic professional agency, right?
And academic side hustles are not abandoning your values. They are actually part of a value system. If they're not aligned with your values, don't do them. But you do want to protect yourself financially early on, but also making sure you have options open to you and you're not locked into an institution that may or may not be loyal back to you.
Right. And if someone does try to tell you that caring about money means you're not a serious scholar, I've got some fingers for them. Because what they're actually saying is that your economic vulnerability makes you easier to control, and we're going to exploit that. And that obviously makes me angry.
Yeah. And there are legitimate ethical consideration. You owe time to the university. You owe time to your students. You need to be careful about any conflict of interest, intellectual property, physical property. You need to think through all of these issues, but that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Right. And you want to monetize strategically, right? You want to be thinking about in terms of branding, just as you think about your research strand. What's your branding? You build that portfolio of whatever you're doing with the same kind of rigor you're bringing to that research portfolio.
And remember that your viability, your financial viability, and your ability to be successful in what you're doing in your main job are actually connected to each other. Because if you're worried about money, if you're worried about making rent, you can't think about your students effectively. And these are actually going hand in hand. So think carefully about the choices you make.
Yes, and practically have those institutional conversations early. Refer to your documents. Build relationships with colleagues who are already doing this successfully. Get a mentor to help you think through those things, and be transparent with students about economic realities. Like, as a grad student, I wish I would have known a couple of different things.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has ever talked to me about most of these things.
Yeah.
And we try to talk to our students about options.
Actually, one of the things that sticks out in my head was someone in my grad program saying, "Ugh, some people just do this to get their consulting gig." And I was like, looking back on that now, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have more critically interrogated that.
Yeah.
But there is this like, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, knowledge, free.
I wasn't even aware. It wasn't even in the water. I just thought, academic job, this is where I'm going. And I did get the academic job. I still needed the side hustle. I got a decent job right here. I'm still here. I wasn't suffering here and still not suffering here. But the side hustle helps you survive in a year where you have 2 kids in college and 1 getting married.
Single, no kids.
All right.
Love it.
So remember, the system tells you money doesn't matter. It's the same system that pays administrators, but not necessarily you. So let's make sure that we are successful and we have options.
Yes, and until next time, we need you to stay scholarly, but stay solvent.
And keep building careers that actually work for you.
And if you have academic side hustles that work, let us know in the comments. Tell us about what you're doing that works. Mostly so we can steal them. We'll see you in the next one.